Well, hello, friends, and welcome to Coffee with Caregivers. I'm your host, Jess Ronnie, and my guest today is Amy Julia Becker. Amy Julia is an author, a speaker, and an advocate whose work explores faith, disability, family life, and what it means to build communities of belonging. She's the author of several books, including A Good and Perfect Gift and To Be Made Well, and she hosts the podcast Reimagining the Good Life. Through her writing and speaking, Amy Julia invites us to rethink ideas about success, wholeness, and the good life. Amy Julia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, this is Coffee with Caregivers. So, as we begin today, can you just share with my audience who you care for?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have three children. I'm also married. I'm not going to call myself a caregiver to my husband, but my oldest
Well,
daughter, our oldest daughter, Penny, I know, is 20 years old and has Down syndrome. And, we have been in a less intensive caregiving role really over the course of her life than some families I know who've been affected by disability in their stories. But Penny is certainly my child who has the needs that are the most, pronounced among the three of our kids. We've got two younger kids who are teenagers, and both of them are in high school and kind of doing their thing. And so Penny has been my kind of entree into the world of both disability and caregiving that is not the only the caregiving that comes of being parents of young children.
does Penny still live with you?
She does still live with us,
Okay.
yes. She goes to a day program at a local college, and she is, um, I have taken to not saying I want our children to be able to live independently, because I've realized I don't want myself to live independently because of
Oh,
the interdependence that I have experienced as a good thing, in our life. And that said, Penny again is the child of ours who has the most needs. She's 20 years old. She does not drive a car. She will not drive a car. She is able to do some things for herself, very much so in the kitchen and in terms of self-care. And she also needs more um, instruction slash help, just help in all of those things. Whether like yesterday, I mean, this is just a small thing, but she received a jacket for her birthday, and I said, "Why don't you try it on?" And she's like, "Ooh, I'm not sure I remember how to do a button." And I was like,
mm,
"That's right. Like you haven't had a button on an article of clothing because I don't even think about the fact that you can't do buttons because why would you have a button, you know?"
hmm.
And she couldn't. And so I was like, "Okay, I forgot this about you." And this jacket might not work, like, which is not a big deal. I was like, well, maybe we can substitute snaps for it. Maybe you can learn how to do buttons. I'm not sure that matters to you. So it's those types of things where I'm kind of reminded of there being a different set of limitations on Penny's life, that are, that affect me in different ways than what are the limits on my other kids' lives.
Do you expect that she ever will live independent
I
or?
expect that she will not live with her mom and dad for her entire life.
Okay.
Um, and again, I actually hope that she's not like alone in an apartment either, in the sense that I do think that our lives are richer when we are living in
Mhm.
community with other people, whether that is obviously in my case, like I'm in a nuclear family, married and children. But I also think there are lots of living arrangements where we're not with our nuclear family and we're also not completely independent or kind of autonomous in how we're living. And that's what I would hope for Penny. And that's what she hopes for herself, as well. So, and I think, over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, I think that's a distinct possibility, but we're not like pursuing it at this moment.
Okay. And I know your journey as a writer and as an advocate has been deeply shaped by raising Penny. How did becoming her mom reshape your understanding of what makes a life meaningful?
Yeah, it was a really profound change for me. So I was 28 years old when Penny was born. happily married. I was a seminary student, so did a lot of thinking about things like what makes life meaningful. Why is the world broken in the ways that it is? Why is there goodness and love and peace in the world in the way that there is? What do I get to do to be a part of that? So I did have a lot of those ideas, and yet when I was given a child who I was told early in her life would have an intellectual disability and developmental delays, I realized that I did have a hierarchy of human value that I would have said I didn't believe in, but I functionally did believe in that. Um, and I didn't understand, honestly, like if Penny and I were both human in the same way. I mean, it's not as though I thought she was like an alien species, but I realized that there were some ways that I thought about what it meant to be human that didn't align with my experience of having a daughter with Down syndrome. I knew she was beloved, but I also wondered whether there was a degree of kind of brokenness that came with disability that made her in a different category. I didn't see at the time that she was a gift in this world, even though also she was a needy, vulnerable human, and that might have been more obvious to me because she had Down syndrome than it would be in other situations. So yeah, so she profoundly changed first my understanding of people with disabilities in terms of the value and worth and dignity and significance of their lives. But actually, what was probably even more profound was the way she changed my understanding of myself, because I had been able to pretend that I was a person without limitations and without vulnerability and without needs and without even to some degree brokenness. And then I started to realize that I might actually be free to admit those things about myself, and that there was actually a tremendous gift in recognizing that earning my keep, striving to stay ahead, proving myself, grasping for the top of a social hierarchy, that I didn't have to do those things.
Mhm.
Like what unbelievable freedom and joy that actually allowed. So yeah, so she changed my understanding of people with disabilities, and that's important. But actually, there was a deeper level of um, need for me in terms of understanding myself and really all humans that came from having her in my life.
So much to unpack there. So admittedly, and I was telling you this before we pressed record, I have read one of your books, To Be Made Well, and it was life-changing. This is such a beautiful book. And in this book, you talk about how there was an experience once when you were at your church, and I believe it was the elders or somebody
Mm,
gathered around Penny to pray for her healing.
yeah.
And and then you talked about other people in the book who had similar experiences, people who have disabilities, who have encountered well-meaning people who want to pray for them to be healed. And we also have experienced that with our son Lucas. And what you just mentioned resonated so deeply with me because I also, in praying for Lucas's healing for so many years, have come
Mm,
to understand it wasn't about healing Lucas, it was about healing me and my preconceived ideas about how I am whole and perfect and not in need of healing,
yeah.
where the flip side of that script is no, it's about healing my heart and my
Mm,
perceptions and how I operate in the world. Like Lucas is fine. He may have physical disabilities, but I often think because he doesn't bear the weight of this world like I do, he in some ways is closer to heaven in
mhm.
his innocence than I will ever be able to reach because of what I carry. So, what originally led you to write this book, To Be Made
Mm.
Well? And what question were you hoping that the book would explore or answer for you or for others?
Yeah, it's a good question. There were probably two different kind of big themes that were intersecting in my own heart in terms of wanting to write this book. One was just that I had experienced a greater awareness of both a mind-body connection when it
Mhm.
comes to our mind-body spirit connection, really, when it comes to life in this world. Another was that had, excuse me, like helped me in terms of actually addressing just some physical aches and pains. So there was that. Um, but there was also an understanding of healing in terms of like a biblical definition of healing that was really, really different than the way I thought about healing, both in terms of what you just had to say, like maybe I'm locating um, brokenness in the wrong places. So there's that. Like maybe I'm just misunderstanding where healing is needed, but also healing as wholeness and not just wholeness. So a mind, body, spirit wholeness is one thing, but also wholeness in the sense of how we relate to God, to self, and to others, and in community. Because I do think that as we are experiencing and participating in healing in our own lives, we also get to be a part of a healing work that is potentially could be happening in our communities as well. And that leads to kind of the second strand that led into this book. Before this, 4 years earlier, I had written a book called White Picket Fences. It's a memoir about race and privilege and disability, and kind of asking the question as a white woman with a lot of stability economically and opportunities, social advantages. Um, what does it mean for me to hold the truth of who I am and participate in hope and healing in this world? So I wrote that book, and the last line of that book is, do we want to be made well? It's a question. Um, and this was somewhat an answer to that question, even though it is a very different book. It was also me continuing to explore those themes of what would it look like for us as humans to participate in what I believe is a healing work that God is about and doing all the time, that we can be a part of if we have kind of the eyes to see it, the willingness to participate in it, that we're invited into that. So
Mhm.
that this book came out of that. And then the last thing I'll say is that as you know, the book centers around this story in Mark chapter 5, that is both a story of a woman who's been bleeding for 12 years who comes to Jesus, and a synagogue leader whose 12-year-old daughter is dying, who comes to Jesus kind of simultaneously. And that story is just something that, I mean, I had gone back to, I mean, all the time for like 10 years. So originally the book was not going to be only about that story, but over time that's what it became. So all those things just kind of combined, and here you go, to be made well.
Yeah, I'm going to read a quote here from your book. It's on page 90, as you're talking about this idea of wholeness. And I'm resonating with what you're saying because in my own life, I've even noticed it, you know, the work is done individually, and then that individual work is brought out communally and systemically and then globally. It's this regeneration of what should be occurring, not necessarily that that's what is occurring, but in a perfect world, where the lion shall lay with the lamb, this
Mm.
is all of us marching closer and closer towards, the kingdom of heaven here on earth, but that's not necessarily how it always works. So on page 90, you write, one of the dangers of living in a constant state of distraction is that we never go to the bottom of our pain, our sadness, our emptiness, which means we never find that rock bottom place of the peace that passes understanding and rest ourselves there. So, taking that quote with this idea of wholeness, do you believe that it is us living in this constant state of distraction that you talk about in the book? I mean, I operate so similarly to you. Like you took social media off your phone, you took email off your phone, and then, because you are going to get this under control. And then you
Right.
realize like your life is so much harder. So you like put the apps back on and you're going to dedicate your mornings to not checking your phone and all these rules that we sort of put around ourselves and all these distractions. Do you think these distractions are contributing to our brokenness and our lack of being able to be healed?
Yeah, I absolutely do think that the distractions are contributing to our brokenness, and I do think that we are in a particularly distracted moment. And I think that's part of the human condition because we can
Hmm.
read, people from 2000 years ago who were talking about distraction, and kind of the monkey mind that got in the way of receiving the love of God. And I think it's also interesting what you were reading in that quotation is almost like an emptying that needs to happen before wholeness is possible, because I
Hmm.
do think there's a sense of being, yeah, you need to like empty ourselves in order for the work of God to be what fills us. And yet there is a real it's scary, it's painful, it's countercultural, and sometimes confusing to even know what on earth does that mean to empty ourselves, right? And when I mean, as I wrote about, when I take my like social media off my phone, I find myself in the bathroom checking the weather, because I'm like, oh, well, if I can't check Instagram, I might as well find out if it's snowing in Colorado. Like, who cares? But there is this constant desire for like distraction, for information, and I can dress it up and say that it's because I want to learn things, but it was very apparent to me that actually what was happening was me just trying not to be present
Hmm.
in this moment to my own feelings, to the needs of the people around me, to my own needs. Maybe I was like afraid that God would not be present in that space or that I wouldn't experience something, real. I don't like being bored, all of those types of things. I've got a lot to do, so let's just keep doing them. I think all of those things can really keep us and really be barriers to our own healing. Because ultimately, like when I was writing this book, I don't ever actually say it in the book, but then the kind of teaching I did on the book afterwards, what I ended up teaching on was this idea that like honesty, humility, and hope lead to healing.
Hmm.
So that honesty is kind of an awareness of like, oh, I notice that whatever truth, whether that's a truth about like my knee hurts, or there's pain in my relationship with my mom, or there's brokenness in our community, right? Like, I mean, that honesty can kind of operate on like any number of levels. And then humility is, and I'm not totally in control of that. I'm not going to fix all the problems. I don't know what is needed here. So there's a degree of like asking for help, recognizing our own limits that we really need. But then on the flip side of that is the hope, right? And I believe that this can get better. I believe that God is present, that healing is possible. And I really have found that honesty, humility, and hope, it's almost like a spiral. So it's not a circle. You're not like stuck in exactly the same place, but it's also not like a line that goes just up and to the right. Like you just step right along this path towards healing. It's like, okay, honesty, humility, hope. And now I'm back to what feels like the same place, but I've learned a little bit. And so I'm going to do it again, and I think we can spiral upward towards a God who really does long for and give us the capacity for experiencing healing.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that can be applied to just about any situation, either, healing in our bodies, healing in our minds, healing in our relationships and our
Yeah.
marriages. And for me, it was always vulnerability, surrender, and hope.
Mm.
So very similar. The
Very similar. Yep.
vulnerability, the honesty, surrender was always the word that the Lord kept bringing
Hmm.
back to me. Um, and then that hope for a better future, and to keep moving towards
Yeah.
whatever God had for me. Okay, to shift gears a little bit, my audience is aware that about 2 years ago I had total burnout and kind of have gone through my own journey of re-regulating my nervous system after living in fight or flight for 19 years and caring for Lucas, my disabled son. And in this book too, you talk about your own journey with trauma. I mean, really, and how your body was just racked in pain. My body was also racked in pain. It was more my
Hmm.
hips. I just lived in constant pain
Mm.
and went to, PT and masseuses and acupuncture and had MRIs, and nobody could figure out what was going on, until we moved Lucas into Hope Farm and I started doing somatics and breath work and yoga, and I started to learn how to rest. And then magically, miraculously, that pain completely disappeared within a couple of months. So
Yeah.
share with my listeners, because I know So many of my listeners are in the trenches. They are raising disabled kids, many of them with high support needs, living in that survival mode. Their bodies are racked in pain. Share a little bit about what you discovered in that mind-body connection and how you started to move into healing.
Yeah, so for me, I was at a point where my lower back was hurting, and I felt like in a way that was disrupting my life. So it had been going on for a long time, but it was at a point where I every single night woke up in the middle of the night and took either an Advil or a Tylenol PM in order to get back to sleep. And I was telling at that point, our youngest daughter was 3, and I was telling her she can't sit on my lap because my back hurts too much and I
Mhm.
can't pick her up. And it was just, again, like kind of disrupting my everyday life in ways that I thought, I didn't injure myself. Like, I don't know what's going on here. And I sat down with a yoga teacher, and actually, I remember I literally sat down. I was like, "This is going to hurt." Just the sitting, on a yoga mat, cross-legged, was going to hurt. And I said, "I think there must be something that's out of alignment in my body." And she said, anytime I hear the word alignment, I wonder whether there's something that's just out of line in your life. And so I started talking. I talked for an hour, never moved. And as I talked, just from sitting there talking, it was like there was like a valve in my back that was unleashed. And it was like the pain just started to dissolve. And I was almost embarrassed because I was like, I came to you for like, downward dog. And instead I am like experiencing, I mean, it felt like a miraculous experience of healing,
Mhm.
honestly, because of how much pain I had carried for so long. So I told her at the end of this time together that this had happened. And she said, it's going to come back. And not because it needs to, but because you are so used to this. And this is the place where you're holding a lot of messages about who you are and about how you have to be, that you are someone who can't have needs because you're providing for the needs of everyone else, that you're not supported. You have to support yourself. On and on. And so she said, so you need to start actually and she was not a Christian, and I did translate some of what she was saying into an understanding of a God who is real and present
Mhm.
to me. And so it was like, okay, every time I can start to feel my back hurting, I also can be praying that I would know that God is with me and supporting me. And I would be trying to identify again, am I believing a lie about myself or about the world around me? Like I'm not allowed to have needs. Well, what if I'm allowed to be a needy person? In some similar way to my 3-year-old, even, especially before God, And so over time, there really was this release, like a true release, not just that momentary one of that pain, but it also got me thinking about lots of other experiences of aches and pains in my bodies, even getting sick at various points and saying, well, what were the kind of conditions that I was putting myself through? I don't know if you've ever had the experience of being like, gosh, it's kind of nice to be sick right now
Oh,
because I get
yeah.
to cancel all these things. And it's like, anytime we're like, oh, this is fun. I have a terrible head cold,
I wish I could go to the hospital and have a baby again. Like I've
You're
been
like,
there.
okay, what is
Right,
going on, right?
right.
So I just started noticing more and more of those types of things. And I also started noticing how much, again, like the language of the body is incorporated throughout the Christian scriptures and the Jewish ones, like the Bible. And really considering what would it mean for me to kind of bring myself in my body before God and pray not for healing in the sense of a quick fix to some physical pain, but healing as wholeness, like in making those connections. Like maybe if I'm actually paying attention in my mind and my spirit, I don't have to feel this ache in my wrist or this like debilitating I can hardly walk because my back hurts so much. I'll give one more example. A couple of years, actually, after the book was written, we were moving, and I woke up one night, and I mean, truly, in the middle of the night, had done nothing to myself, like, could hardly walk to the bathroom because my IT band essentially was
Mm.
just so tight. And, I was like, okay, what is going on? And there was just a sense of me being afraid to move forward. Like, we're moving houses. I don't know how this is going to go. So it really felt like this gracious invitation to pray,
Hmm.
to be like, oh, I am petrified about what's about to happen. And I really need to like talk to Jesus about this because I cannot just walk forward on my own. Like I literally cannot walk forward on my own. And I hope many people do not go through the kind of the extremes that I sometimes do when it comes to me not paying attention to what's going on in my heart and my mind. And but I'm also have started to become really grateful that my body will tell me when I am not aware of these other things going on, and to be able to start bringing those to the Lord and to other people too. Like, hey, what do you think is going on? Will you help me process this? Um, and obviously, all of that is wonderful if we've got like hours and hours to reflect and contemplate. Most of us don't in general life, and certainly as we're talking to listeners who similarly have these kind of caregiving responsibilities that have a different physical and just like emotional, but also time toll, right? On
Hmm.
our bodies, our minds, and our spirits. And that's where again, finding like really short, like almost breath prayers
Hmm.
when those parts of our bodies are activated, to try to be asking the question of like, what is this about? And like praying for actual whatever almost message is being brought to our consciousness, that we would be able to receive that and pray for God to enter into that with us. That's what I would say.
Yeah, our bodies are fantastic at warning us if we pay attention. I notice too now in these past 2 years when I start operating with clenched fists, I'm like holding on to stuff too tightly, and it's
Yeah.
it's almost painful for me to have to like open my hands, and it's going
Mm,
to the Lord and saying, help me, like I have to stretch them back open because I'm
mm,
like moving through life with closed fists again. And then that's
yeah.
like an indication of I feel the stress in my neck and in my back and in my hips and all the other places. And even as you're talking and you're kind of recounting these experiences that you've had with your body, I'm realizing that in each of these experiences, you're kind of working through that circle of honesty, humility, hope, because you're humbling yourself, you're going to the Lord, you're getting
Yeah.
honest with the Lord, and then you're seeing hope because you are releasing it and you can walk into something better for yourself. So, for those listening, is that a good first tangible step for, I think, people of faith, or if you are not a person of faith, really, it's that honesty, humility, and hope circle because you can't step into wholeness or healing or wellness without vulnerability, right?
Totally. Yes, on the vulnerability. And yes, I do think that for me, again, returning to those, that three, that kind of honesty, humility, hope has helped to release a lot of tension and pain. Um, I also think some of that absolutely should happen kind of within ourselves and in conversation with God. I do think that the honesty, all three of those things, honesty, humility, and hope, will also become real in a different way when we tell somebody else. I have an easier time telling God that I feel helpless than telling my husband, for example. Like saying it out loud to another human, actually, for me, has been really an important part of no, no, I really mean it. Like I really am in a place of acknowledging that vulnerability, neediness, surrender is another word you used. So I do think in the same way that I don't know, like if we ask God for forgiveness for something, that's like important, but it's a different experience than asking the person that we wronged for forgiveness, or confessing, just saying like I did this wrong thing, out loud. So I do think that other people can be a significant part of that journey as well.
Yeah, and that leads to your section on community. So
Hmm.
let's end with that. How does community aid in our healing as caregivers and as people? And speak to the caregiver who really, due to the profound nature of what she's walking through and her child's high support needs, just really can't experience consistent in real life community. What
Yeah.
would you have to say to her? or
I
him?
mean, I think the first thing that I would have to say is just that there is a profound need among caregivers for community, and it is not the fault of the caregivers that they have that need or that it is so hard to realize that need, like to get on the other side of it. I think one of the things I see in the disability space and have experienced at different times is a sense of like um almost a like I'm isolated and now I have more work to do because I'm supposed to not be isolated. Like I'm
Hmm.
overwhelmed and now I have more work to do because I'm overwhelmed. Like and I just don't want to perpetuate any sort of like blame or shame for being in the experience that we are in when we're in those places. And so what I at the same time, I think that one of the real problems in our culture is that we don't see the gift that all humans are to one another. And so trying to have a mindset as a caregiver that my child, presumably for whom I'm caring, is actually a gift to our society. Other people should get the privilege and honor of knowing this child. And part of what I get to do is be the introducer, the person who gets to figure out what a community of support might look like. And that in and of itself can feel overwhelming. And so, I mean, one of the things I'm doing right now, I'm working on a new book, which is actually for families affected by disability. And it has three kind of components to it. And the first is to start with delight instead of deficit, kind of seeing
Hmm.
your family through that lens, which doesn't say there are no deficits here or no limits, just that there are delightful aspects of who my child is and who our family is that I want to really build from. But the second is to connect to community. And how do we, it's like looking at how do we actually do that and what happens when we do that. And then the third is take the next step. So trying to think about not how do I connect to community if I had 7 years with no, bills to pay, or if I
Or
had
no,
all the
no
time in the world.
children. If
Right, no
I,
children,
if
because
I just
it's
get rid
like
of my
how do
kids.
I connect to community in my actual life?
Right,
Like
right.
in within the demands. And so really that probably means I connect to community in 5-minute snatches here and there. And so is that a text message? Is that a an online group? Is it something that, like only happens once a month, even though I wish it were every day? I don't know. But I do think and I have some resources on my website. If people are listening to this and they're like, "Ooh, I want more," either on the like honesty, humility, hope thing, and then also on I have a community audit where it's kind of lists 10 different aspects of community so you can kind of ask, do I have any of those people in my life? Do I want to contact them? Are there places where I have none of those types of people and I maybe could start to, cultivate or develop that? Um, so I think it's really important that we figure out how to not be alone. And that's important for us. It's also important for our kids who are receiving our care. We're going to remain the primary caregiver probably. And there are other people who get to be a part of that. And that is ultimately like to their advantage. Like that is to their delight too.
Hmm.
And so having a mindset that helps us to move in that direction, hopefully is something that leads to healing, not only again within ourselves and within our families, but actually within our community because they're missing out.
Yeah, that's good. And just a little tidbit for anybody who is listening, who is in that space where it feels very daunting um, and challenging to get out into community. I know for myself, Voxer, the app, the walkie-talkie app, has been a lifesaver for me for the past
Mhm.
couple of years. My girlfriends and I like Voxer each other as we walk circles in our basement to get our steps in, like an hour every
Yes.
morning, and it's at least a form of connection. And it's a way to
Yeah.
process and work through things, and you're not just living in that isolation. So it's free. Find a friend you can Voxer with, and it can be good for your mental and physical health too. If you're like doing laps in your basement, like I do, my kids are like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Just getting my
Gotta get
steps
moving.
in." Yep, got to get moving. So. Well, thank you so much. This has been so enjoyable today. Where can people find out more about you? You mentioned your website. Can you give us that address?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So amyjuliabecker.com is definitely the easiest hub. There are ways there to either follow me on social media or, sign up for Substack. I write a weekly newsletter. And then there are a lot of free resources on that website. So there's like a guide for groups to go through to be made well, the book that you recognize or recommended. It's like a 7 week series of readings and questions from that book with like 5 minute videos that go along with it. There's also lots of just kind of free PDFs with things like the honesty, humility, and hope, both visualized as well as kind of spelled out. And I've got something on there that is like prayer for healing, like how to think about different parts of my body and like bring a prayer to that body part and ask God to be present there. So that's another place. So yeah, amyjuliabecker.com should lead down lots of different rabbit trails for people who want them.
Perfect. And as we end today, I like to end each of my episodes with three quick questions. The first question is, in one word, how has being a parent to a disabled child changed you?
Mm. One word. Oh my gosh. I would say openness.
That's a good one. Second question, if you had 1 hour all to yourself, how would you spend it?
Mm. It's funny, you've gotten me thinking about yoga. So it might be yoga. And it also might just be reading a book. I mean, probably more likely, I would read a book in front of a fire.
Have you done any yoga nidra?
I've not done yoga nidra, no.
Oh, life-changing.
Yeah.
Check out YouTube. I do it every
Okay,
day now.
yoga nidra. Thank you.
Almost every single day. It's basically a yoga nap. It's incredible. Like,
Awesome.
I mean, it's amazing. So, right. And third question, how many cups of coffee are you drinking these days?
So I drink black tea rather than coffee. I don't like coffee. And I have about 4 cups a day. So that's probably 2 cups of coffee in terms of caffeine, but it, stretches out over more warm beverages going into my body.
All right. Well, thanks again. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It's really nice to be here.